Welcome to our October installment of our Wellness Wednesday Mental Health Chat. This is a new series brought to you by the Center for Family Involvement at VCU's Partnership for People with Disabilities. The last Wednesday of each month, we have a raw and real discussion about mental health. I'm Erin Croyle, the Communications Specialist for the Center for Family Involvement. I host these talks along with Patrice Beard, our Mental Health Specialist. Today, we're joined by James Harris, founder of Men to Heal and author of Man, Just Express Yourself.
Yes, how you guys doing? My name is James Harris. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I'm a father. I am an entrepreneur, and I'm also a resident counselor for my LPC. I am an investor, as well as I do outpatient as well as private practice in the setting. And as recently as April, I became an author of Man, Just Express Yourself, which is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and of course my website, men2heal.com. And pretty much I got started with this work because a lot of men are reluctant to seek services, whether that's going to the doctor for yearly physicals or early detection. And then, if you get into the mental health side of things, it's even a drastic cutoff for that. So for me, I figured I would have to be the person to bridge that gap and bring it back into the forefront. And as of now, it's definitely been a successful movement. I started a movement called Men to Heal, which focuses on men's overall wellness, their mental health as well as their physical health. And mental health is something critical because, especially within the climate today, with the rising numbers of COVID, the potential isolation, substance use, the traumatic events that we're seeing in the news constantly. So it's just critical that we pay attention to certain things. And as men, oftentimes we have to be the provider. You can't take off work, or it's not a lot of access and availability based on the demographic or based on just males within the field. So I came back for a couple of different reasons.
So it's interesting you talk about the provider, the male dynamic of being a provider, because I was reading Psychology Today ahead of this interview, and it was just talking about how it's this silent health crisis, men's mental health, and how part of that is, interestingly enough, like a loss of some of those male-dominated jobs like manufacturing and fisheries and wildlife and sort of that manual labor has changed the dynamic of breadwinner. And it also mentioned the rates of divorce and fathers not feeling a part of their families and what an impact that has on men. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it varies. I mean, especially depending on which region of, I guess, the U.S. you are. Like if you're in Detroit, then factories are something that's prominent within you making money. But of course, here, more Eastern, we have a lot of different jobs, opportunities. You can be pretty much anything you want to be, from a lawyer to a doctor to a therapist, and you can still be within the forefront of your community. But the impact of those things being less now does impact how men view themselves as far as being, I guess, that overall provider, I guess that man of the house and stuff like that. And of course, the society stigma of expressing themselves and being vulnerable plays a factor in that, based on their reluctancy, because now, how can they be viewed as, I guess, dominant or a head figure if they're not in a position to constantly provide, or, even with the pressures of that, that can lead to depression, that can lead to substance use, that can lead to a lot of different things, just based on not being able to fully articulate how he's feeling in the moment and how he's feeling with the lack of being able to take care of, people that are potentially dependent on him based on the lack of jobs and lack of opportunities.
I was going through the book, which I love. So I had two questions specifically about the book. I know I'm kind of straying away, but what I liked about the book, and I want to get your input on that, is I noticed it's not just like a straight read. I noticed there's a whole lot of interaction in there, a whole lot of draw it out, man, list it, man, all that, which is awesome. I just wanted to know what your frame of thinking for that was. Why did you choose this format?
Sure. So in private practice and in the age of social media, I get questions constantly to my inbox or email. And of course, people, instead of me just constantly answering individual questions, I just thought it would be a good idea to open it up to the masses. And this is different stuff that I do in practice and my fellow therapists do in practice as well. So the opportunity came for me to just put together a list of different things that men often face. So it's about 65 different topics, from affirmation, goals, trauma, mood, affection, depression, abandonment, grief, conflict, confidence, peer pressure, ego, tough love, mentality, boys will be boys, insecurity. So it's so many different topics. And I wanted it to be not only some that you read and try to maintain. I put it this way so you can actually write out the answers to the questions that I provide, if you want to express yourself that way. But if you are a younger person, you probably want to draw it out. Or if you're just more of a artsy creative person. So some of the images I've been getting back from people just doing the exercises have been amazing. I'm talking about colors, I'm talking about, drawings and stuff like that. And it's a way to express yourself because, like, just imagine a wife or a partner wanting to know what their man is thinking. In any other setting, you bring up traumas or emotions and stuff like that, it'll be difficult and it might be met with resistance. So if you purchase this book and give it to the man and he completes a couple of different exercises and give it back to you and you guys process them together over dinner or, just at a different time, it wouldn't seem like a chore to him. It would seem like something to enhance you guys' relationship. Or if you got a young son that's, 10 years old, he can do these couple different exercises and you guys can process those as well. And then in a couple of years, he can flip back through and see how much he's grown, see if he's still triggered by the same things, see if he, need room for improvement and different things like that. So it's a tool for, of course, the young man, the older man, but I would say more so for the family because so many people are vicariously affected by, of course, our individual actions. And if we speak in men specifically, then it's definitely important that they are able to express themselves without being chastised or demonized for doing so. And in most cases, it's probably not the people that's close to you that are telling you not to be emotional or, you're soft or weak or something like that. But from a societal standpoint, those are oftentimes the stigma associated. So with this way, you guys can process it together. He can complete it and give it back to you as the partner or the spouse, and you guys can go from there.
James, you bring up something to me that's really important, which is, a lot of the people that follow us are women. And a lot of the women that we work with are mothers of children with disabilities. And we hear from them that this is hard, but it's also hard on my spouse, on my husband, and how can I help them because they're not willing to reach out to get help. So what do you recommend for that?
Yeah, so, and that's one of the most, probably one of the most common things. Of course, the women, will reach out, they would talk to their girlfriends, they would journal, they would do different exercises, but men wouldn't do that. He's probably holding it in and just piling it up, and it's going to, hopefully it doesn't eventually explode in a negative way, such as reckless behavior or substance use and stuff like that we predominantly mostly see in these cases. So that's another reason why my tool is helpful. This is a way that he can, get his feelings out and express himself. And then hopefully by doing exercises within my book, he can then say, oh man, I would like to explore therapy a little bit more or take the steps to get better understanding of some of the exercises that I did, whether he see me or any other therapist for that matter. But I would definitely say for the women to continue to be open, continue to have that nurturing space to where your partner, your husband can come to you and express himself without being demonized or victimized. Or, you just got to continue to create that space within you guys' environment. He should feel needed and supported and affirmed. His feelings are validated. But from a traditional standpoint, I know most or some households don't view it that way. The man is reluctant to open up and be vulnerable because it probably would get thrown back in his face later. So it all depends. But in these cases in which you speak of, if the child is the primary, center, you should definitely want that additional help. So you should want to ensure that your partner is able to come to you and offer you help or just express himself without, it coming back. Because the more open he is to you, the more help he can provide. And then vicariously, you guys can help, the child in need in a more suited situation. So now it's not only on you as the mom, it's on both you guys because, he's vulnerable, he's open, he's willing to help. So I definitely think it's important for you as the partner to create that safe space.
What I like too is that a lot of people don't know is that men, not in general, but something I didn't know is when they're going through depression and anxiety and things like that, there's anger. There's a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And I think stereotypically, we think of depression as we have that woman brain on where we're thinking crying and sad and being in the bed. And then like years ago, I noticed my son just kind of wanted to fight everybody. And I was like, what? And depression, that was not on my radar.
Yeah, so I mean, if I could talk about that a little bit. So just to be clear, men and women both experience this depression. The symptomology of it the same, but the displayed actions are very different based on presentation. Men present more irritable, more anxious, opposed to. So the depression, it's a period of symptoms for lasting 2 weeks and above. That's how you get the major depressive disorder. So of course you got the isolation, you got the lack of sleeping, you got the change in appetite, the loneliness and stuff like that. But with men, you also have to look for, of course, the anger, irritability, feeling anxious, restless, loss of interest and pleasure. They're not watching sports, they're not hanging with the guys that they used to hang with. Thoughts of suicide tend to be a little bit more higher. They tend to engage in, more high risk activities. And it depends on the guy too, because he can potentially overwhelm himself with a substance, whether that's marijuana or alcohol and stuff like that. But the need to have that, I guess, high risk is more prevalent in men based on the fact of they have to do something to ensure that they still are in charge of the situation in most cases. So in addition to the symptoms that of course men and women face, like I said, was the lack of eating or overeating or lack of sleeping or, poor rest schedule and stuff like that, they have the additional things to ensure that they can get back in charge of it. And on top of that, handling it properly by seeing someone or exercising or, journaling and stuff like that, that women tend to do. So those are issues that can present.
And you mentioned suicidal thoughts just now, and on your website, and then statistically, men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. So, I mean, just talk to us more about that, like the ways to prevent it, signs, but also, why that's the case, perhaps.
Yeah, so women tend to attempt suicide more, but men complete suicide more with more vigorous means, such as, of course, weapons and guns, and, women will probably use pills and, different stuff like that. So the numbers, I mean, it's drastic for many reasons, but it will all depends on a specific case, I guess, in which it is. But from the overall standpoint, suicide is prevalent now at higher rates just based on the change within society, of course, stemming from the environmental factors, which is COVID, which is the lack of jobs, just the additional pressures on that man to want to provide for his family and stuff like that. Because on average, it's like 123 suicides a day within our country. And the age range from that has increased even now within 2019 and 2020 between those ages 15 to 24. And the second leading is of course males ages 25 to 34. So those things are definitely prevalent. So you definitely want to look out for, of course, the warning signs. Somebody talking about they want to die, they want to kill themselves, talking about feeling empty and hopeless, talking about guilt or shame or feeling trapped, just unbearable pain and stuff like that. So in most cases too, it's probably a substance there. So whether it's alcohol or drugs, feeling anxious and agitated, they normally withdraw from their family and friends. Of course, the change in eating and sleeping patterns as well can be seen in depression, but also in suicide. You know, they got different rage and want to seek revenge. So it all depends on that person. So you definitely want to look for mood swings. If somebody tends to want to give away all their belongings and stuff like that. So overall, suicide is definitely, you know, a tough thing within our society, especially today. So in order to help somebody, though, I personally feel that you should be direct. You should ask them. It's going to be a hard question for you to ask, but you definitely want to ensure that you ask them, because it's definitely easier to risk that friendship than to risk that person's actual life. So, you know, ask them directly, hey, are you thinking about harming yourself, hurting yourself? And listen to that answer, you know, and after that, you want to follow up, do some type of safety check just to make sure that they are keeping, you know, within that one to harm themselves or others, of course. And don't keep it a secret. If they do reveal to you that they have these thoughts, then reach out for help, whether you see a therapist or a counselor in the community, or just call the non-emergency number and try to get them admitted, call crisis, try to get them admitted and stuff like that, because it's definitely is needed for them to be comfortable with coming to you, as well as helping their situation of not harming themselves. But you definitely, we have to understand that suicide doesn't discriminate. So men definitely complete it more, but it doesn't matter based on your gender, your age, your ethnicity, and stuff like that. You know, of course, some of those areas are more prevalent than others, but anybody can be affected by suicide. And of course, the factors are different. So you definitely want to ensure that you're looking for the depression symptoms, the pain symptoms, environmental factors such as loss of job, the COVID numbers, the unresolved trauma we see in the news with the many killings and the riots and stuff like that. So you definitely want to be vigilant and be able to help your loved one, and just ensure that if they are expressing harm, that you remove, you know, weapons and different stuff like pills and stuff from the home, just in case, if you are unsure. You know, that's part of creating a safety plan as well.
I had a question, just a basic question. Like, so let's just say I or somebody else watching has a concern about their husband, or has a concern about their son or something like that, an adult son or teenage son, and they're showing some symptoms like that. What would you suggest as a non-confrontational way of just like in your brain, you're thinking, I think you need to see a therapist. Like, I think you need to go out. I think you need, you know, and that doesn't get received too well, you know. So do you have any suggestions on how best to approach that?
You mean how you as the woman approach your male son or
Yes.
partner and to seek help?
Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, so you definitely want to be consistent. You want to be, you don't want to enable, you know. So if you see something, you definitely want to ensure that you say something and bring it to their attention. And if they don't want to do it for themselves, hopefully they'll do it for the betterment of you guys' relationship. But again, even if he don't recognize it, it's nothing I or any other therapist can do if they don't see an issue with their actions. So he has to have some type of accountability and awareness of what's taking place. So hopefully he does internalize and see that his actions are not only affecting himself, but it's affecting his children and his partner, his teammates or co-workers or whatever the case is. So that's one of the steps that you can take. Just make sure that he's aware that he's impacting, you know, not only himself. And then two, what you can do is get with him and do some research with him. Just say, hey, hon, or son, you've been a little off lately. I noticed you haven't been eating. I noticed you haven't been sleeping. Or I noticed you a little bit more antsy and agitated and stuff like that. Would you mind you as the woman doing research and providing you with different information and resources, or you want to look into some stuff together? So I would definitely suggest you have a game plan and you make it more so about you opposed to him, because again, if you come to him within a certain I guess, demeanor and aspect, it can become cantankerous because it'll be met with resistance. So again, I mean, my book or any other books can be a tool for that. Like, hey, would you mind? How about we do a couple of these exercises and talk about them? And then that way you can gain insight and, you guys can process it together. So again, it doesn't feel like it's a him issue. It's a let's us grow as a unit issue. So you definitely want to do that. And you want to be open. You want to have an open door policy to where he can feel comfortable with just saying, oh yeah, I have been off lately. And it's because of dot, 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 dot. And you not immediately fly off the hook. You just listen, respond with empathy, or process it in a way that you guys can have a exchange dialogue about it, and go from there. And also on my YouTube, I have a YouTube page, and I have a couple of different videos on there. I have a video, Men in Depression. I have a trauma video. I have a video on there about communication, so that probably will help. It's another video on there with tough parenting conversations, so that'll probably help a mom navigate conversations with her, with the children. So it's just so many different things and tools that you probably can obtain from the videos or on my YouTube or on my website, of course, and then of course from my book as well.
Right, and we're going to post all that at the end of this, so we'll be sure that everybody can see that. Also, I mean, thank you so much, because I know I needed to hear that, and I think a lot of other women need to hear that, how to approach, because I think sometimes we kind of take on the role as the care provider and having to, take care of the kids and take care of whatever, and sometimes we take that attitude towards our our men in our lives, like we want to come in and tell them what to do and tell them what they need to do, and that's not a great way. Sure. I was also thinking too, the way I would approach this too is sometimes, like, I know some guys are like we're like, talk about your feelings, how do you feel? And they're like, oh, I'm fine, But I thought, that's why I bought the book, just to present it and just to have it, and just so they give it to them, that maybe they didn't realize something, and when they're going through this and filling this out even on their own, they'll be more self-aware, and maybe it'll get that dialogue going.
And that's what happened in most cases. A couple guys, of course, they purchased it, and then the ones that they received from their partner as well, they do send a message saying, oh man, I didn't know this was the case, or now I got insight on why I did certain things. And I was able to talk to my partner about it, again, because she wasn't as overbearing and nagging. She was more so open and accepting what I had to say based on. And then also from the guys who weren't able to articulate, they can't come to you and say, hey, baby, I apologize. I was upset because da, 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 da. They can just write it out and just say, hey, baby, go and read what I wrote, and they can go from there. She reads it and then they process it together, because some people aren't able to verbally articulate their feelings. They'll much rather write it down or draw it out. So that's another way the book was able to be a tool too. And it's so many different couples that I've gotten testimonials from, married 24 plus years, saying this is the most they engaged and had conversations in a long time. So I've been fortunate enough to put a piece of literature like this together, but I definitely, again, wanted to be a tool for the families and not just for men specifically to enhance themselves. But just to follow up too, like, for the suicide, it's a couple of different hotlines and stuff like that on my website. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-TALK, which is 800-273-8255. So that's definitely beneficial. And there's also a crisis line that you can text, which is, you can text hello to 741-741. And again, like, all of these things are confidential, and that's also a part of the reluctancy of men wanting to seek services too, because they, like, we as therapists have confidentiality, but you as a client, as a patron, don't know that. You feel that, oh man, my information might get used against me. I might lose my job or get my children taken away. No, we can't share your information. Of course, confidentiality, but of course, there's HIPAA as well. So your information is secure. So feel free to definitely talk to somebody about your issues and not just wear them, because you continue to wear them, you're pretty much just stuffing a balloon and it's going to eventually pop. Now, whether that pops in a good way or pops in a way to where it's detrimental to not only yourself, but your potential relationship with your children or your partner, those things can be a hindrance. So you definitely want to ensure that you are mindful of your level of how much you can bear. You know, resilience is different among each person, so we definitely want to ensure that we are, you know, carrying a load that we can carry, but also releasing what we need to release and process what we need to process within any given time. Any different situation can affect each person differently, you know, whether it's trauma or depression, or just overall, you know, not knowing and understanding your own feelings, not knowing yourself, not being centered. So it's definitely important that you follow up with somebody or talk to your partner as open and freely as you can in most cases.
James, I want to add to talking about suicide. The one thing I learned that really surprised me, and I think it's important to remind everyone, is that it's, and you've said this, but it bears repeating. It's okay to talk about it. It's better to talk about it. It's important to talk about it. You're more likely to prevent it if you talk about it. And I think we all forget that because tough issues we just ignore. The one thing that you just had me thinking about, I am a woman who has a husband. I have 2 boys, a daughter, but I had brothers. My mom had brothers. And I think that we get so caught up in, you know, people are people, which they are. But my experience is that male and female brains work very differently. You know, when you mentioned nagging just now, you know, my husband thinks I'm nagging, but actually I've asked him something 3 times and he just gets so focused that he hasn't heard me. And then it feels like nagging, and it's this constant struggle. But then I see it with my boys, like they can watch a TV show and not be distracted at all. But yet I hear every single thing going on around me. And then we talk about the mental load and female multitasking. And I guess my point of bringing this up is when we're talking about mental health, you know, what differences do you see in the male female brain? And I see such a reluctance for the men in my life to either seek out therapy, talk about therapy, talking about feelings. I mean, I don't ask my husband to talk about his feelings, but he's not even really comfortable of me talking about mine. So, you know, how do we work around that male-female dynamic when it comes to mental health?
Well, so neurologically, I'm not sure if there is a difference between the male brain and the female brain. You know, most I know is, of course, the brain is developed by age 26, and you know, you got the frontal lobe and hippo lobe and stuff like that. And you know, so from the anatomy standpoint, I wouldn't be able to answer that from a neurological standpoint. But I would say now that you are a parent and you see, so you're a parent and a wife, so you see what your sons can be if they are where their father is potentially, if the cycle continues. So I would definitely suggest you create a nurturing environment for your sons to better express themselves. So by the time they get your husband age, their cycle is broken. So their wives are not in your position. Like, I can't express my feelings, or I don't know your feelings. So that's one way that you can start on immediately with your son. So you definitely want to ensure that you create a nurturing environment and you're fostering an environment to where they can feel their feelings. That's something that I often say, feel your feelings. And the feeling of anger or resentment or grief, it shouldn't be the only feeling that men present with. They should definitely have an environment to where they can be vulnerable and cry. You know, so I don't know if you're specifically fostering an environment to where if your daughter falls, you rush the car to her, and your son falls, it's brush yourself up and, you know, finish playing the game. So it all depends too, because of course, in some cases, then that's what it is. But for your case, I would definitely say, convince your husband as much you can to express himself and express his feelings, because now he's modeling for his 2 sons. You know, so it can go either way. They can adapt to that, or they can strongly resist that and be the opposite. So that will also depend on you guys' dynamic, and hopefully for the betterment of them, he becomes a little bit more open to expressing themselves and being free and eclectic within his thoughts of expression.
I kind of had to laugh because I felt like Erin just totally put you on the hot seat. Like as soon as she asked you that question, all the women were going, "What's the answer?" But that was good. That was awesome.
Well, and I don't, this is the thing. I don't mean to put my personal stuff out there, but I know that I'm not alone in that.
Sure.
And another thing I'm not alone in is the issue of cultural competence when it comes to mental health. You think about you being a Black man. I think about our Latinx communities here. I think about LGBTQ families and men and trans men and women, and how hard it is for them. And I just want to, given the history and everything going around that we've all had to deal with. I mean, how do you help with that?
Sure. So that cultural competence piece is definitely vital as well as important because, like you mentioned, the LGBTQ, which is also high in suicide rate, the Latino population is also high as far as disparities and lack of resources and stuff like that. So something I often say is definitely cultural competence is one thing, but being from the culture is another thing. So you definitely want to ensure that we have as many voices from those specific cultures as possible, whether that's age, whether that's African Americans in the field, whether that's LGBTQ trainings and seminars and voices within those platforms as well. And of course, the disparities with giving access and information and resources to those demographics as well is definitely vital. So what I have here in Richmond is a spot called the Healing Hub. And I do pre-COVID, I've conducted different seminars, bringing different speakers in for various topics, whether that's on LGBTQ education, whether that was on suicide, different groups with first-time home buying, just so people can have access to certain stuff that they weren't normally privy to, credit restoration, the immigration paperwork for the Hispanic population, if they did need to know certain legalities within our rights or being in a sanctuary city and stuff like that. So, but now, of course, COVID is here, so I haven't been as effective this year based on those situations, based on social distancing and the number of people you can have and stuff like that. So now I'm planning to get more innovative and still delivering different messages. But for the most part, yes, we definitely should continue to be cultural competence, but we need as many people as we can from those different cultures as possible to fill those gaps and present different information and insight.
And you talked about COVID, and it makes me think about self-care. And I think about how difficult this year has been. And when I think about men and self-care and self-medication and sort of the line between that for men and women, if you could just address both self-medication and self-care and how that looks different for men, I would love to hear about it.
Sure. So a lot of people still feel that self-care is selfish, and they got to get beyond that thinking. Self-care is definitely vital to you being able to sustain yourself and to help others. So even if it is a situation that you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for yourself so you can be able to better assist others, because then they'll be having a whole you, an impact for you, a grounded you, a more healed you to be able to assist them in those cases. And to be honest with you, that's how I had to look at it. Like I have to ensure that my self-care is taken care of so I can take care of everybody else, whether that's my children or my partner or the community, so that made me change and want to do more self-care, because once you do more self-care, you're more replenished, you're more relaxed, obtain more rest, you're able to provide and go longer, in a more sustainable way. When it comes to self-medication, I guess it will all depend. You definitely want to ensure that you are trying to do things from a sober mind. So if you are self-medicating, you definitely want to ensure that you understand the risks that are involved. You definitely want to ensure that you are I guess, looking at it from a holistic standpoint, not just a substance use standpoint, but of course you want to ensure proper nutrition, proper rest cycle, um, proper sleep cycle and stuff like that, opposed to just masking what you're actually feeling at that time. And in most cases with substance use, people are just trying to numb and become desensitized to a current issue. And after that substance wear off or that self-medication wear off, they still have to deal with the actual problem that they try to avoid. So in lieu of trying medicate or use a substance, definitely try to deal with the root of that issue, try to create a plan for that issue, try to move beyond it, because again, it's going to be there after that self-medication ends. My background story is an interesting one. So when I was younger, I was a ward of the state. I was in foster care and group home. So being in foster care and group home, therapy was mandatory, and it wasn't a pleasant experience for some of the reasons we spoke of earlier, which culture being most of it, but of course too, I was probably a stubborn kid. But for the most part, it was more what you see on TV, like Hollywood therapy. So I'm this young Black kid from the projects, and it was this older big white guy in a certain tie who was unrelatable. It was the age factor. Of course, it was him being older and white. And I just felt judged, and it wasn't able to connect and relate. So I didn't obtain as much as I could from therapy at that time. Fast forward many years later, joined the Army, 8 years, 2 deployments, one Iraq, one Afghanistan. Noticed I was different, and I came back and wanted to try therapy after my last tour, or after my first tour, but definitely after my last tour. And again, it was the same thing. This time it was a older white lady therapist, and it was again unrelatable. And that's in most cases why a lot of veterans don't seek services, because they're not getting it from somebody with that combat experience. Veterans tend to want to do more groups, which is because it's that shared experience. Like, I know, I can understand what you're thinking. I know what you mean when you say you can't walk through the grocery store in the knee out because you smell their blood, or how it is not to be able to sleep and, being startled by certain noises and stuff like that. So the perception is, of course, that older white lady who was in my therapy session with no combat experience, it was more of a check off the box. So I didn't obtain what I needed to obtain again. So for me, it was more so a passion, like, all right, cool, let me pause entrepreneurship and let me figure this thing out so I can provide not only for the men, the veterans, but of course that young person now that's going through the same thing, that want to open up and express himself in therapy, but don't view this therapist as somebody who's not judging him or just going to perceive his issues as one of their own. So for me, it's more of a cohesive thing. It's more of a process to where, like, I'm you. I was in your shoes. There's a level of empathy there, opposed to this is what I learned in class with case studies and books and stuff like that. It's more of, I understand. Let's process it together. Now that we understand it, let's move forward. Let's figure out some things. Let's create a plan. So for me, that's my background in how I got started and why I continue to do this.
So what's the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of, I would say, re-educating men on certain diagnoses. So even if we take trauma or some simple like depression, right? So I don't know your background as far as mental health, but depression, just the basic symptoms of depression: lack of eating, lack of sleeping, poor appetite, falling asleep, not staying asleep, loss of interest and pleasure, the basics, right? So for me, it's presenting it into this man without him feeling like that's a female diagnosis. Like, that's something that I often hear from athletes. Like, nah, man, I'm the star on the basketball team, or I done scored 7 touchdowns. I can't be depressed. That's for cheerleaders. Like, I've literally heard that. So when I start asking them the basic questions, like, oh man, how's your appetite? So I become them in that moment. Like, all right, when was the last time you eat? All right, so as far as your activities, are you playing football because you still enjoy it, or is you just, how is that going? Are you still hanging with your teammates? Or are you isolated now? So when I start asking them questions like that, they start to ponder and think like, oh man, after practice, I go straight back to my room, or I stay in bed until it's time to go to class, or, so I'm like, hey, boss, that's depression. Now that we know what it is, we can treat it. So I would say one of the hardest things is helping them to acknowledge that it's not a gender specific diagnoses with different things, because even basic textbook diagnoses is prevalent. So once I show them that, then they can understand it like, oh man, all right, cool. Let's figure it out. Let's help me to become not isolated or want to get back focused on football. And, I want to be able to sleep throughout the night. I want to be able to eat 3 meals a day so I can, maintain my weight and stuff like that. So of course, yeah, now that we know what it is, we can do that. But if you continue to deny it or continue to not acknowledge it, we're going to be in a position to where we are now.
We talk about stigma and mental health. There's stigma in mental health, but then I feel like it's doubled with men. That's a whole different category of stigma. And then you have the cultural piece.
And stigma. Yeah, and that's the main thing, because it's, ego playing a play, the masculinity views from society comes in play. And then of course, just the overall general stigma of, I don't want to see no therapist. I don't want to be perceived as crazy, because people still also stigmatize the not knowing the difference from mental illness and mental health. Mental health is pretty much your overall well-being, your emotional, your mental, and your physical, aura of you being a being. So it should be a maintenance thing. It should be something that you want to maintain, opposed to just, because right now, if you bump your knee and you need stitches, you're going to go to the doctor. Like, they can visibly see, oh, you got a gash there, let's patch you up, we can get you home. But it's nothing, no tools that we can look and say, oh man, your soul is damaged, or you got this going on with your brain, there's a chemical imbalance there. You lack dopamines, or, it's no technology where we can do that on a daily basis. I'm sure they can get you in the lab or something, scan your brain and see, but just from your partner can't do that. Your mom can't do that. Your coworkers can't do that. So that's the purpose of maintaining your mental health. That's the purpose of going to therapy and stuff like that, to ensure, like, we help you create tools to better socialize, to, better repress those anger and stuff like that, or, just do different things. So mental health therapy or counseling or just awareness is not a bad thing, because we all need maintenance. We all need assistance in anger management and social skills and, ability to cope from different things like that. Because even if you're not affected, you're affected, because a lot of people don't know that. Just there's no way right now that you can tune out what's going on in the news, whether that if you believe in the COVID situation or you don't believe in the COVID situation. It's 220 some thousand people that are dead, so that can be unresolved trauma. Some people are so numb and desensitized to it. Like, let that register, like 200 people dead and nobody seems to care. Like, that's traumatic. It shouldn't be as normalized as it is, like. So those things are needed to be processed, whether you process it in healthy ways, hopefully, which is therapy or proper nutrition, or you exercise and stuff like that, or you are talking to your partner, you're creating a nice environment for yourself, you're doing self-care and stuff like that. But I would definitely say ignore the perception of others and the stigma and get yourself help if you need it.
I know Aaron has a final question, and I know that. I just had a really quick question now. You're still thinking of other things. Do you find it's easier? I'm thinking it may be easier to get the men in our lives to seek help or to seek therapy because of telehealth, because of telemental health. We're kind of taking away the having to go into the office and who am I going to see in the waiting room and all that stuff. Have you found an increase with because of people reaching out because of that, or no difference?
So for me personally, I think my caseload, so just from having a heavy social media presence, having a heavy impact in the community, and having a voice, like mine's is pretty much still the same. Like I was already overwhelmed with, a list and a waiting list. But I would definitely say that my coworkers did see an increase in their people reaching out for therapy based on the fact of it's telehealth and just different things is going on they want to be able to process. So yeah, I would definitely say it's an increase now of people trying to seek services.
So it's almost time. And I just want to wrap it up by asking, what is the best part of your work?
The best part of my work is being able to hear those testimonials from um, parents that come in. Oh man, you're the third therapist. Hopefully you can get through. And then by the next month, hey, this is the most he talked on the way home in forever. I don't know what you guys doing in there. Or, just hearing the wives like, listen, thank you so much. This is the most my husband and I talk in so many years or whatever the case is. So I would definitely say those testimonies of just getting families to men, getting their sons or their husbands to open up and at least acknowledge that, oh man, my actions were definitely impairing, my family, my work, or our relationship. So those things have definitely been amazing and vital to be a part of, just understanding and knowing like, oh, they practicing what I told them, or they, at least considering different things. Oh, they got the book and now they, flipping through it together. I had this one lady who called me and she had her husband on the phone. She said, my husband is trying to breathe. So when soon as he finished breathing, we're gonna tell you why we called. But it's a in my book, it's a deep breathing exercise. So that's what she meant. But when she said it, I was startled. Like I was like, yo, yeah, I should have called 911. But she was talking about the deep breathing exercise. So, just little things like that. I've just been fortunate enough to have people actually doing the different exercises and stuff like that. And then also on my YouTube, just a collection of different people going to the videos and sending that feedback and saying, hey, I sent your video to somebody who was going through XYZ and they feel better now. There was so and to be a resource for my colleagues as well, other therapists, especially the women therapists who have male clients and want a different perspective. So all of those things are definitely worthwhile and it's definitely a good experience.